Welcome to Put Simply, the podcast that puts what's happening in the world simply without compromising on the details. Erdem Koch is my name, Rodney McCune and Ozan Ibrisim, my co-hosts. Gents, good to be back.
Good to see you.
Brilliant. It's been ages.
Well, it was the breakthrough that didn't come through on Ukraine. 5 hours of discussions between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the negotiating team of US President Donald Trump, who flew to Moscow, failed to produce a result. This comes off the back of multiple attempts and multiple claims, I suppose, by particularly US President Trump, saying that peace is around the corner, that a peace deal has been struck, that things are starting to look up in that part of the world. But of course, it's now not. Feels like we're back to where we started, and things couldn't be more grim, particularly for the people of Ukraine. Ozan, take us through what happened over those 5 hours, or I guess more importantly, what didn't happen.
Well, I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. I think it would have been very interesting. But of course, it's come on the back of growing pressure from the Trump administration on Russia and to a certain degree Ukraine as well to come with a ceasefire plan and an agreed deal. But what's clear from that 5 hours of conversation is that one such deal was not reached. And I think we touched on this last week when we were talking about this issue. There is no doubt in my mind that, unless the US changes its tone and starts to put real pressure on Russia, we will not reach or see an agreement. We certainly won't see an agreement that the Europeans agree with or Ukraine necessarily agrees with. It's notable that Ukraine wasn't even at the table during that meeting, or a representative of Ukraine wasn't there. So it's just a very odd situation, but one that I think most experts around the world, and certainly most experts watching this conflict over the last few years, probably would have expected, considering that it's widely acknowledged now that Putin and Russia, they're not interested in a ceasefire or peace unless it has, it looks like something that will significantly benefit them and their agenda. Obviously, as we mentioned last week, Europe's very much against this, and Europe wants to hold its position on a lot of areas. In fact, overnight, I think, or yesterday, Europe announced that it will go ahead with releasing some of the funding that's been frozen, some Russian funding for the rebuilding of Ukraine, which obviously upset President Putin quite a bit. In fact, President Putin, before the 5-hour marathon meeting, made some comments to the media along the lines of, Europe is not interested in peace. Basically, they're warmongers, and if they want a war, they'll get a war, and Russia will come out on top. This is the type of rhetoric that Putin's throwing around. But it's very clear. We've said this from the start. It's gaslighting. Their kind of accusations is effectively confessions. The only party in this whole conflict that wants to continue this war is the Russians and Vladimir Putin, because there have been many opportunities at peace, but peace is not what he's after. He has a longer term agenda, which includes a significant, which will result in significant conflict in the region. Because, for him to achieve that, obviously there needs to be considerable, either people back down and he gets what he wants, or he will try to get that by force, as he has done over the last 3 years with Ukraine. And it's a bit rich coming from the man who's effectively sent, 1 million Russian, predominantly men, to die on the front line, saying that he can take on any army in the world. I think most military experts are probably laughing at that statement.
From a Russian perspective, though, Rodney, and I cringe a little bit saying this, but it hasn't been a successful war. I mean, it's not at where it needs to be from what Putin would have wanted it to be several years on. So I guess the question is then, to Ozan's point, is this an indication that peace is just not something that is going to happen under Putin? the war will continue and there is no compromises to be reached. So I guess it begs the question, why are we trying?
No, I think both sides are happy that the negotiations are not really going anywhere. I think Russia still has ambitions to go further. And I think from Ukraine's perspective, the original proposals were so bad that they had to they had to navigate a way out of that without having uh, Trump lose his mind again. I mean, the stuff around Putin threatening Europe feels like like a short drunk man shouting at the bouncers while he's held back by his mates Orban and Lukashenko, right? But actually, he has no intention. It's just all noise. Um, and it's all about trying to get leverage over Ukraine as part of these negotiations. I've no doubt whatsoever that Russia did not expect that their ridiculous 20-year plan that was presented by Witkoff was going to be accepted by anyone. But what they wanted was to create a division between Europe and the US and between the Ukraine and the US in presenting a way out that Ukraine would have to accept an awful lot, but would put the conflict on pause. And I think that's the other thing you got to bear in mind is this is not a conflict that's going to be resolved. It's going to be revisited again. And any pause is just going to be an opportunity to rearm, re-equip, prepare again, and continue because, Putin promised an awful lot with his denazification and returning Ukraine to a vassal state objectives, and he hasn't achieved them yet. And he's expended a lot of political capital in Russian lives and those of others within the broader former Soviet republics in achieving, as I said, very little. And even the recent success um, with a city that's now been turned to rubble was at huge cost in terms of manpower and lives. So yeah, yeah, this is going to continue in the same way until the US probably better arms and better supports and better equips Ukraine to the point where Russia starts to move backwards, and then I think we might have a position where there's going to be some negotiation. But I also don't see America taking that course. So they haven't had a successful war. It's not going to be a successful war, but there's no appetite to get off the carousel at the minute, I'm afraid.
I mean, this is the longest 3-day war in history. I think they were supposed to take Kiev over in 3 days, and what are we now? 3 years into it, 4 years into it, and look, I think what also needs to be mentioned is that the special U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, these are the people who are sitting across the table from Putin and having this conversation. So, I mean, you have to question the sincerity of this whole effort. Let's not forget, and it's easy to forget in today's kind of media world, but Steve Witkoff just about 2 weeks ago was caught on tape giving guidance and navigating Russian officials through how they can win Trump's heart, and how they can appease him, etc. So these are the types of people. This is just not a serious administration. It's not a serious effort, and I'm sorry, but there's just yes, both sides are probably not upset that this didn't go anywhere. But I genuinely do believe that if there was a fair deal on the table, that Ukraine and the Europeans would probably seriously consider it. Whereas I don't believe that Putin would do that, considering that every time a fair deal has been put on the table, Putin's basically said no, this is not not in Russia's interest, and has completely crashed the negotiations. So it's very sad. At the end of the day, many Russians, many Ukrainians probably want this to come to an end, and it's just politics being played, and thousands of people every week are paying for this really bad politics being played and really bad theatre being played out. These people are paying for us to watch it on our TVs. They're paying with their life.
Yeah, it's quite mad that Jared Kushner's seen as the seasoned diplomat of the pair. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Though, mind you,
it,
remember his father served 14 months for this witness tampering and corruption or tax evasion type thing, whatever it was, where he hired a lady of the night to seduce his brother-in-law and then attempted to blackmail him
I mean, it's a
because he had been
class
caught.
family.
Yeah, yeah. So, maybe they're thinking, well, he knows all about these types of things. Maybe he'll be able to honey trap Putin or something. Who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows what's going through their minds? But yeah,
Uh,
Jared Kushner, seasoned diplomat. Yeah,
yeah.
is
Good luck trying to trap Putin
this
in Moscow.
of course Trump in the first term gave Charles Kushner a presidential pardon to get him released early, of
Of
course.
course. I didn't notice though whether Witkoff or Kushner were actually drinking anything at the table. So that's also something I need to look back through the footage to see if they're having any beverages. Because 5 hours without some water and tea is a long time. Long time to go. I think,
It
particularly
was also
Witkoff.
quite an ugly table, I thought. I know that's a
Yeah.
small point, but it sort of looked like a large dressing table rather than a table where you'd have a meeting.
I
Um,
think it's the same interior designer that's designing the new ballroom in the White House. So
yeah, probably.
the
I'm,
same
I'm just
inspiration
getting the
anyway.
Russian builders in. Why do they have so many microphones? Oh, don't worry, it's part of the decor.
I mean, there
Exactly.
was a time on Put Simply where we used to save the comedy to the end, gents. But I'll take it. I'll take it halfway through the episode.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah.
Well, no, I think it's a. I mean, if thousands of people weren't dying every week, I would say that this is a laughable situation we find ourselves in 2025, when someone like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are sitting across the table from Putin and trying to negotiate some sort of ceasefire deal. I mean, you can't take this seriously as much as you want to, but we need to take it seriously. The world needs to take it seriously because thousands of people are dying every week. It's just outrageous.
It is, and it's one of those moments where you struggle to believe what is actually happening. But such, I guess, is the world that we live in, and we try to make sense of it every week as we sit here and talk to each other, and of course, multiple people also doing the same thing. And one of those other things that we're trying to make sense of at the moment is, while this particular war isn't necessarily going the way that Trump wants, and of course he came into power saying that he'd fix this war and multiple other wars and has made that claim multiple times, but he's now waging a war on migrants in the US. Ozan, what's going on there?
Well, last week, I think just as we were recording, a very, very unfortunate incident occurred in Washington, D.C., just a couple of blocks actually away from the White House, where two Virginia National Guard officers were, I think, standing in front of a metro, and they were approached in kind of like an ambush style attack by a 29-year-old Afghan national. And shot multiple times. And I believe that one of those National Guard officers, Sarah Beckstrom, she died later on in hospital. And the other person who I believe is uh, showing signs of recovery, but is still in a critical condition. And of course, this, as you would expect, this started pretty much, uh, everything that you could think of from a point of view of political spinning. And within hours of the incident, it became Joe Biden's fault, and it became effectively a way for Trump to bring a whole bunch of new policies around allowing refugees and asylum seekers into the country. He blamed Biden for rushing into allowing Afghans who had helped the American forces over the many years that they were there, allowing a lot of these people in without being properly kind of vetted. And of course, I think it's fair to say that, Biden's whole handling of the Afghanistan withdrawal was a debacle, and one of the kind of, it was the beginning of the end for him, I think many political commentators would say. But this awful incident, very similar to the incident where Charlie Kirk was brutally murdered. Within hours, it became a political shitstorm, and was used effectively as a political tool. Again, I would say to defect from all of the problems that the administration's facing, but in this case, to push forward what is becoming more and more a very unpopular kind of anti-immigrant stance, and I think it's going all it's going to do is incite further hatred and animosity towards immigrants, and particularly in this case Muslim immigrants in the US, and I believe that this 29-year-old had come to the US after actually working for the American forces. I believe he's had some links to the CIA helping them out. And whilst he was firing, there are reports of him, making all sorts of, yelling out all sorts of Islamic propaganda, etc. So for Trump, this is a perfect political opportunity. He's taken it, and the country is going backwards.
Yeah, I mean, he started out after this incident by saying third world, everyone from the third world must go back, whatever that means, or they must be banned from arriving, and now he wants to just deport all Somalis, saying it's not even a proper country, and etc. etc. And broadly being as offensive as he can be, but he did the same in 2018. I think it was, when he was going on about what he called shithole countries and immigrants from there during his first term, if you remember. And then he had to walk back and sort of deny it. But he was on about Norwegians would be fine, but all of Africa wasn't. I mean, it was all just mad stuff, and it's the same now. But he's got to. But he. I think the problem with the Somali stuff, apart from being, deranged anyway, is he sort of followed that up by then linking it to an elected representative in Ilhan Omar, right? So that's what he's got on his mind when he's saying this stuff. It's about individuals who he feels are opponents as well, who are elected politicians whose safety is potentially at risk when he goes down these types of lines. Deeply unpleasant. I think he referred to her as garbage, and he's back to this point of going. If you're so pleased about being Somali, go and fix Somalia and all this sort of stuff. It's just unpleasant. It just unpleasant, offensive, not appropriate for the president of the US, and just more of the same of what he does, and he will progressively alienate minority community after minority community until he erodes beyond any recovery for the Republicans, their ability to persuade broader demographics to vote for them at the next election in the same way that they managed to do so for his presidential election. It's just, I don't know. I mean, divisive, unpleasant, inappropriate, wrong, whatever other way you want to describe it. Really bad.
Ozan, you say that a lot of this is to distract from some of his domestic woes, but the Republicans did have a victory overnight in Tennessee. Take us through that.
So last night, the Tennessee number 7 U.S. House seat had a special election after the previous Republican congressman resigned earlier in the year. And for people's kind of context, or to put simply, this seat in just 12 months ago, this seat voted 22% for Trump. So that was the margin between Trump and Kamala Harris, 22 points, which, in the context of such a polarized electorate is the mother of all landslides, you could say. So what I'm trying to say is that this seat, I believe, was engineered to remain a Republican seat for until the end of time. And you mentioned correctly, the Republicans held that seat last night, but instead of a 22-point margin, that margin went down to about 8. Now, this is still a win. They still have they still keep that number in the Congress. But what it effectively means is that that there is serious problems. Now, you can of course talk about special elections not being all that well kind of attended in terms of turnout and people not really caring about this stuff and coming out and voting. So there's definitely an element of that. But the other interesting element here is that the person that was running it, the Democrat that was running, a lady by the name of Afton Ban, was considered as a significantly progressive candidate, which, most people I think will understand that Tennessee is not necessarily the kind of, hub of progressive politics. So
Oh,
you had a
please,
progressive.
Ozan.
Well, I mean, I guess some parts of it is, Nashville, I suppose. And this electorate actually, this district actually does take in quite a bit of Nashville. So, um, you've got a progressive candidate who managed to get within 8 points of what is normally a 22-point margin with Trump on the ballot. I think that's going to send some shockwaves across Washington, and particularly Republican House members who are sitting there saying, well, 3 weeks ago we had elections that showed that in places like Virginia and New Jersey, the Democratic candidates were getting 7 points better than Trump was doing. In that 7% of the people who voted for Trump in 2024 changed their vote. These are all things. If you've got half a brain, you would sit there and go, okay, I'm in trouble. Even in very safe Republican seats. They're going to be sitting there going, okay, this could be one hell of a blue wave coming for us, because people are genuinely upset. People are genuinely concerned about the future of the the future of the country, and the direction of where Trump's policies are going, because they're not addressing the things that they elected President Trump to address. And you only have to look at the recent polls that have come out. Last week, I cited a poll which had President Trump sitting on, I think, about 37% approval rating. I did mention that that seemed like an outlier. So put simply, you have obviously averages of different polling companies who bring out polling around politicians' approval ratings. And when we look at something like that, we would probably think that it's an outlier because it's below the kind of average of about 42 or 43%, which is kind of the national average right now. However, we had another poll last Friday that came out from Gallup, which had President Trump's approval rating at 36%. So you've now got, over the last 2 weeks, two pretty credible polls having President Trump approval rating sitting at around 36, 37, which is, I mean, incredibly low. And the other interesting thing there was that when they asked the question, do you approve or disapprove of congressionals, or the job that Congress is doing? The approved number was 14 and the disapproved number was 80. So 14% of the country, according to this Gallup poll, approves of the job that Congress is doing. And considering Congress is run by the Republicans, I think listeners can start to do the math and start to kind of put a picture together that things are not looking good for Republicans, and they desperately need to do something to turn things around.
What is it that they need to do, Rodney?
Distance himself from what's going to become an unpopular millstone around their neck, right? If it's Republicans, what they've got to do at the point when they know what was an electoral asset becomes an electoral burden, is to distance themselves, which is just going to fuel division within the Republican Party. Yeah, so we will have to see. The only thing about these close elections it's always more impactful if there's an upset and someone actually wins who shouldn't win or wasn't expected to win. It becomes a numbers thing for the nerds. When people get closer than they otherwise would have done or previously did, but the public still will, judge the outcome of an election based on who the winner is.
I,
So yeah, I mean
I
the
kind of agree
new
with you, but I also disagree because I think it's, if you look at all of the major media coverage of it now, it's being spun as this is, a major warning to Republicans. Because let's face it, I mean, numbers matter in this sort of electorate where if you're seeing such swings as you saw in the other elections in the midterms, people start to take notice of the fact that momentum is shifting significantly. And I think, this will get spun as a major warning sign for Republicans.
And
So,
I think that
yes,
resonates with party members, party workers, elected representatives. I just don't know whether it cuts through in the same way to the public. And
what
that's
it does is, no, you're right. I don't think people are still much more concerned about kitchen table issues. But what it does is it creates much more anxiety within the Republican Party, which then turns into further, I suppose, disunity, further kind of it starts to build a narrative around the Republican Party being a not united, not being able to govern, just complete chaos. And if the Democrats are smart, they would be pushing these sorts of things more and more out there. So yes, on its own, I don't think it makes a huge difference. But what you're seeing in the last 3 to 4 months is a significant shift in the narrative being, yes, we all agree Trump was a fantastic campaigner, we all voted for him, etc. But all we've got, like we had in his first term, is chaos again. And you've got a very divided Republican Party. You've got the MAGA number one ticket holder, Marjorie, as Trump calls her, traitor green, jumping ship. Like, things are not going well. So I think it's a narrative that's forming, and if that starts to gain momentum, things like Tennessee, I think, make a big difference.
And just shifting gears back to the international scene for a moment, some tensions between the US and Venezuela, Rod.
Well, obviously we've got a large military buildup, aircraft carriers, submarines, uh, special forces, ground troops, aircraft as well, with the aircraft carriers, obviously. And it's either in advance of military action or in some weird way to try and bully the current leadership from vacating the country and leaving it free for a Trump-approved Nobel laureate to come in and take over. But in parallel then is all this other stuff around kill them all, Pete, as he's now denied having said that he supports the decision making of the general in charge at all times.
I think you should go into that a little bit more, Ronnie, because it's a fascinating story.
Well,
What he's
obviously
been accused of.
non-military boats, which they say are carrying drugs to the US, and therefore they're designated as narco terrorists, so therefore it's lawful. That's currently in dispute, as I understand. But even if they are narco terrorists, what is becoming more difficult for Secretary of State for War Pete Hegseth is that under his command there was a video leaked, I think the Washington Post, which showed a ship that was struck by military action had survivors in the water while the ship was incapacitated. I say ship, I'm talking about a small boat, speedboat, one of these fast boats.
You mean a narco vote?
A
Narco
narco
boat.
boat, yeah, exactly. Well, we don't know whether it's a narco boat, but
Of
yeah,
course we don't.
we don't,
Being
right?
facetious.
Mm. And the suggestion was that Hegseth then directed to kill them all, which of course would constitute an unlawful act under rules of engagement by the US in terms of their own regulatory things, in breach of the laws of war and potentially murder. So all quite serious. Um, and yeah, and because there's an obligation on people being disarmed to capture rather than kill. if they're in the act of surrender or no longer a threat and all these other things. So there's lots of these considerations. Anyway, that's what's being argued at the moment. And in true political style, maybe showing that he's more of a politician than people give him credit for, Hegseth has sort of decided to take the social media in an effort to throw the general in charge under the bus, by saying that he supports all his decision making, therefore parking the responsibility for the secondary strike on this general. And it's brought back into focus the fact that there's questions about the lawfulness of this anyway. It's supposed to be against drug cartels. That's supposed to have been all under the direction of Maduro. So therefore, it's back to the government or whatever. But it's not a source of drugs that are coming into the US. That's Colombia when it comes to cocaine. When it comes to synthetic drugs that are causing huge problems in the US or have been over recent years. Again, not coming from Venezuela. So it does seem to be a weird effort at regime change. It's now coming under greater scrutiny at the same time as they're having a significant military build-up in the region. Yeah. One other interesting point on this that I read recently was the UK has taken the view that because these are illegal acts by the Americans, they're refusing to share intelligence with them, that they're acquiring in the Caribbean in order to intercept these boats, which of course strains the intelligence sharing relationship that they have with the US and others, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, whatever.
I mean, it's quite fascinating that that you have a situation where they're claiming that they're in a war with these people, and then as you said, war is governed by a whole bunch of protocols in terms of what you do with people who are trying to surrender, etc. But they're arguing that, and if it gets found that they're actually not at war with the particular people that they blew up in that boat, then as you said, it becomes almost like just cold-hearted, blatant murder. It's unbelievable, and in fact, also the military build-up. Apparently, I heard is the biggest military build-up in that region since the Bay of Pigs incident in the 60s, where the US was obviously very concerned that they were about to enter into some sort of nuclear war with the Soviets. So it's a fascinating situation.
Bay of Pigs not very successful. Not wishing this action in Venezuela to be more successful, obviously, but not the same either. I just hope that they take a step back from this and realize that it's not a very good idea.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of stepping back, another country that has taken a step back is Bulgaria after days of protests saw the government revoke its budget proposal, Ozan.
Look, Bulgaria is entering the Eurozone next year. So this is the first, I suppose, budget that's going to be presented in euros. And there's been growing concern, particularly amongst the youth, about further kind of spending in the budget. And, there's I mean, the theme is not a very new theme when it comes to Bulgaria, etc. You've obviously in the last 10, 15 years, you've had a number of movements come up and protest, corruption, and that seems to be the theme on this occasion as well. But it's centered around this budget increase budget plan, which included things like additional social security contributions. Further taxes, etc., which are obviously designed to provide more money for the government to increase spending. But the people protesting are claiming that this spending, whilst the government's taking with one hand, the people on the streets are claiming they're not seeing much of a use for this spending or seeing much result from this spending, considering that a lot of it's getting kind of taken away or disappearing due to state corruption. So there've been serious clashes with police, etc. But the government's back down. They've taken this budget off the table at this point in time, and it's one to watch because obviously, Bulgaria along with Romania, etc. These are countries that have typically relied on significant European or EU support, and and in the past, this sort of stuff has created, massive kind of internal problems for them. So yeah, let's see what happens next with the Bulgarians.
It's certainly one to watch, but I mean, lots of countries as they've adopted various parts of EU regulatory framework and so on, encounter these types of problems, and eventually the solutions find their way. It'll be interesting whether it's used as a way to destabilize. But yeah, I think it's worth watching. So with you on that, Ozan.
Well, gents, wonderful speaking this week as always. Speak to you again next.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.